Hello everyone, this is Leo from the Making Misplaced channel. Sorry if about last week we were unable to get videos recorded in time. If you have heard, I am getting a new job, so it has been a little bit hectic lately. But nonetheless, here we are again trying to get back on the regular upload schedule, and we're going to be starting with Varga. This deck is actually a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. I know some people really think that it's brain dead, and I kind of understand it is very simple, but it's still fun. I kind of feel like it's like Youth Perk in a sense, where the deck isn't overly complicated. You're not doing a lot of like, oh, you gotta like min-max things as much as you can. You kind of have one game plan and you're sticking to that game plan, and that's kind of what Varga is like. It's just gonna do its 2 attacks or its 4 attacks as often as it can, and then it's gonna try to go in for that divine skill, and it's just trying to get crits to, you know, have the pressure on Vanguard, and it's, you know, retiring the front rows, and it's drawing a bunch of cards, and you know, it's one of those straightforward kind of decks, and I kind of like these decks. You know, I do love my complicated combo decks, but sometimes you kind of want to just have fun, play some simple Vanguard, and I feel like that's what Varga is. So quickly, let's just go over Varga himself. So when he attacks a Vanguard, you can counterblast 1, and you retire all of your and your opponent's front row rear guards, and then this unit gets plus 10k until end of turn, and at the end of the battle, you stand it unit, and it gets -2 drive until end of turn. So essentially, you get 1 swing, retire the front rows with twin drive, and then he'll restand again, and then he will get another attack after that, but there'll be no drives, right? And then his divine skill is at the end of battle, this unit attacked a grade 3 or greater Vanguard. If your opponent's damage zone has 4 more cards, and if this unit has attacked 2 or more times, you can counterblast once, or counterblast 1, stand the unit, and then it gets drive +2. So essentially, you know, once you are in divine skill range, you swing once, twin drive, restand, swing again, no drives, and then use the divine skill, stand up again, swing again, and then you'll have twin drive again. That does make the Dragon Empire OT kind of weird, because if you get the Dragon Empire OT when you activate the first ability, it'll kind of be wasted, because sure, your Vanguard's going to restand, but you're losing those 2 drives anyway. So if you hit Dragon Empire OT, it's just going to restand, but it has, you know, no what is it? It's got no drive checks anyway. So you really want to hit the Dragon Empire OT during your second restand, when you're using the divine skill ability, because at least then if you restand with the Dragon Empire OT, you'll still have twin drive. It almost makes me not want to play Dragon Empire, but it's just so good to get that it kind of outweighs it, right? If you can get it during the divine skill turn, you mean that's 4 Vanguard swings. That is going to be, you know, unbeatable, right? There's no way your opponent comes back from that, and I like that chance. I mean, it's the overtrigger, right? You can't account for it popping off in every game, even though it feels like every game I play it shows up. But you know, definitely I think still play Dragon Empire OT. Now moving on to the main deck, you've got, you know, pretty standard stuff here. We're playing 3 copies of Varga in the main deck, and then 1 Chalice, so that we can get that extra Persona Ride, because if we get Persona Ride, that means that we're a 33k restanding Vanguard, right? Which means they can't even use a front to guard us, because 33k will match, so they gotta fucking use more cards, which makes it harder for the opponents guarding, right? They gotta keep throwing more cards. So obviously that's why we play as much ability as we can to get the Persona Ride. Then moving on, I do play 2 copies of the grade 3/4 Varga. I do kind of like it. You know, it's, if you're going first, you can't use the divine skill anyway, and you can't use your multi-attacker. So being able to just put one of these on the board means that you can put any triggers you get off of your Varga on the rear guard, because it can't be retired as long as it's in the front row, and your other front row doesn't have a unit with the same name as it. It also gets plus 10k, so it's a 23k attacker, pretty good. It also, funny enough, is a booster as long as you have a grade 3 greater Vanguard with Varga in its name. So you can just play this as a booster behind any of your other units, and it's just a 13k booster, which is pretty good numbers as long as you can get a 15k in front of it. That makes it 28k, and that's perfect for numbers, right? So just 2 of it, you know, kind of for if you're going second. I mean, if you're going first, it's just a good like pressure play early on, or it can just make your columns a bit better, right? It makes you be able to not have to attack with your rear guards first, because that is an issue with Varga, right? That you have to attack with your rear guards first because they're going to be retired. But because of this unit's ability, it won't be retired, right? So pretty good card, but I only played 2 of it because it's only good if in those going first scenarios, pretty much. And then moving on, we have the multi-attacker we just talked about, and that is 4 copies of Shura. She's got 2 abilities. When she attacks, you can Energy Blast 2, and it gets +5 until in that battle. And then you choose one of your rear guards with a different name from her, and it gets, when this unit is retired from rear guard, put it into your hand instead of to drop until end of turn. So there is a lot of targets for this ability. Obviously, anything you retire with the Varga will be returned to hand because of this ability, so it doesn't have to have a retire ability on the unit itself. It could just be because Varga retires it, right? Then we have the second ability. When it attacks a Vanguard, or when it's retired by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its card name and your opponents at grade 3 or greater themselves, you can counterblast 1, call it to rear, and it gets +10k. So then it becomes a 20k attacker. You can reuse that first ability, so it's a 25k attacker. You know, the card's great. I kind of can't complain, right? Obviously, the deck has a bit of a CB issue because your Varga is using a CB every turn, and as soon as you start using your Shuras, you're using 2 CB a turn, which means that you're going to start running out. So you have to manage yourself a little bit there. But, you know, it's kind of like other decks, right? You just have to be careful, kind of make your choices very well. Obviously, you use these if you're going second. You want to put as much pressure as you can on your opponent. Then moving on, we have 4 copies of the new Energy Cycler, Fallheart. You know, just another way to use energy. The deck doesn't use energy besides Shura, right? So you can use these earlier on. I mean, Shura only costs 2 energy, so worst case, you'll be able to use 1 activation of it just from the 3 energy you get. And as also, Fallheart's second ability is actually pretty good because you get a grade 1 card without Sentinel from your drop and call it to back row rear, which there is quite a few grade 1s that we play in this deck that are pretty good, so getting those back is never going to feel bad in this deck. And then if you give the ability, or you use the Shura ability on this, then you can just get it back to your hand and then use it to guard as well, right? Next up, we have 3 copies of the grade 2 from the Ride line, and that's Boulder Axe Dragon. This is your grade, or you're going first attacker, right? When you ride up from grade 2 to grade 3, you get to call this to rear guard, and then when it attacks a Vanguard, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its name, it gets +5, and then at the end of the battle, it retires itself and draws you a card. So it gets itself off of board before Varga can retire it and replaces itself. Pretty good. And if you're going first, you can't multi-attack anyway, so might as well just get some extra card draw, you know, still be able to pressure. It's a 15k attacker. You put a copy of that grade 3 behind this, you're at 28k. That's the perfect number, right? Now we move on to the grade 1s. There are quite a few here. There's a lot of tech choices here. The grade 1 is the most versatile one I've seen in a lot of decks since Luard. But starting off, we have 4 copies of Shahab. When it's placed on rear, it gets +5 until end of turn, but it is a 6k base, so don't be confused if this doesn't become a 13k booster. It is just an 11k booster, right? But when you would ride from your ride deck, you can ride with put this unit into your soul instead of choose a card from your hand and discard it. So you get to make yourself some soul, and you don't have to discard cards as well, being able to play these to make your numbers a little bit better when you're attacking earlier on, because you do want to pressure your opponent as quickly as you can. So that's what this guy's there for, being able to just become an 11k and then just be able to save you cards from hand, right? Next up, we have 4 copies of Midhat. This card is when your unit stands by a card's ability, you retire it, draw a card. So, you know, your Varga is going to restand by its own ability, so this will kill itself to draw you a card. So perfectly good, right? And then if you use the Shura ability on this, when you retire it from its own ability, it'll just come back to your hand, so it doesn't need to be in the front row to get retired by Varga. It'll just come back to your hand because of its own ability. Being able to draw a bunch of cards is pretty good, and you know, you can just boost with them and then get them back to your hand. Then we have 3 copies of Impale Horn Dragon. I am considering playing a 4th, but it's kind of, you know, sometimes I really want that 4th copy, and sometimes I think, oh, you know, I think I have too many of these and they're not as great as I want them to be. But it's got 2 abilities, right? When it boosts, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its card name, it gets +5, so it's a 13k booster, which is pretty good, right? It's a 13k booster, similar to the grade 3 that is just a 13k itself. This makes your numbers pretty good. And then its second ability is when it boosts of grade 3 or greater Varga, it gets another +2 until the battle, and then at the end of the battle, you Soul Blast 1, retire it, and draw a card. That's where my that's where I'm kind of like a little iffy on it, right? Because that ability only works behind Varga, so if you put it behind anything else, it's just gonna stay there. And you know, with Shiranui still being kind of prevalent, you don't want to keep as many units on board so that they don't have a lot of options to hit you with, right? Obviously, you're going to have plenty of options because your rear guards are being retired. But if you can kind of maintain it by keeping the Shuras going back, or the cards you target with Shura back in your hand, worst case they can just do is choose to attack you with Shura, which is still pretty bad, but a little bit more manageable, right? So I'm iffy on playing the full set of Impel Horns. So far, 3 have worked pretty nicely. We did get to go to a tournament this weekend, so we did get to do some results. I did go 2-1. It was a very small tournament, so not a lot of players, but you know, I went 2-1. Then we were playing 2 copies of Galnet, just some extra shield, and you know, worst case you can draw a card off of it. You can bring it back from the energy cycler, so it's another good card to target. But you really don't use your ride line for anything else, so you can just, you know, have a 20k shield, which will help you stay alive against some of the decks that might also try to aggro you right off the bat. Then finally, the last grade ones are obviously your obligatory 3 PGs, Elementaria. You kind of have to, no real choice here, right? Then we move on to triggers. We spoke about it earlier, but Dragon Empire OT because it restands your Vanguard, right? You can't, hard to kind of argue against it, right? Then we play 3 draw triggers because fronts kind of don't work in this deck, obviously because Varga retires both front rows. Obviously there are some scenarios where you have double Shura where you might want them, but the draws are just, you know, I think better overall, helps you draw into your pieces. That's one of the things the deck doesn't have. You're just blind drawing, you're not really selective or like filtering, right? So it's kind of hard to get exactly what you want. So, you know, the draw triggers do help us get to that, right? And then moving on, we have obviously a critical. We are using the soul crit, although this deck doesn't really need it because it doesn't really use soul all that much. But you want to crit your opponent, you want to be able to crit them, restun your Vanguard with a crit, and just hit them again. So a crit, right? And then lastly, we're playing your 4 heals. No effect heals because I feel like the effect heals kind of are depend on what your locals metagame is like. So hard for us to decide for you, right? If you have a lot of Shiranui players, play the higher grade. If you have a lot of Varga players, you can use the multi-attacker one. If you have something like Triumph Dragon, you can use the crit one, right? So for me, I just kind of play the vanillas for the most part, right? There are some decks where I'm going more into fine-tuning. That's where I'll change the heals around. But if I'm just playing, you know, your locals, you can just get away with playing the vanilla heals. But yeah, this deck is actually a lot of fun. I know people really think that this is brain dead, and then it's kind of like the next Shiranui. But I don't know. I feel like at least this deck isn't making you attack yourself with your own cards. And it's just, you know, doing its own thing, right? It's gonna do its multi-attack as often as it can, and you know, that's what it's gonna try to do. It doesn't really have any like hidden tricks to it, right? It's just, you know, attack, and I think that's pretty fun. You know, I did pretty well with it. We're trying to get the new promo so that we can get out some of the new decks that come out. You know, I want to do Chaos again. I want to do Tamayura. I want to do Ava. Ava is one of my favorite decks, and I'm hoping to do it again. You know, hoping to get shit on for not having the correct list or the optimal list, whatever they'll say. But that's fine. You know, everyone, we constantly get told that like the decks aren't like the list that like some other YouTubers will say. So we're at this point, we're just kind of like enjoying making deck profiles for y'all and having fun. So, you know, we'll be here. But again, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.